Well, hello and welcome. Here is another episode, another session with the Accession ESM podcast, Everything Service Management. Today, Sunil and I are delighted to be speaking with Tuan Vu, Solutions Consultant from 4Me. I'll bring Tuan to the stage. Tuan, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Sunil. It's great to be here, and pleasure to be speaking to you both.
Likewise. Hoping to learn some more stuff about the 4Me platform and looking forward to the insights you're able to share. Sunil, I know you had some great points to kind of cover off. Maybe you could leap in with those.
Certainly. Thank you, Dan. And it's a super pleasure to have you here, Tuan. So thank you for joining. So one of the things that we know about 4Me as a platform is that it has certain characteristics or certain capabilities, perhaps a better word, for MSPs. So for services organizations, typically within IT, who are delivering, services to third parties. So what we wanted to cover up today, Tuan, is, your view or your take on how MSPs can really benefit from those capabilities within the 4Me platform. So we've got a number of different areas, I think, to cover off, right? Some things around kind of the service hierarchy, the way the account design works. You have a great view on managing costs across services, that sort of thing. But perhaps maybe the starting point is just, your perspective on this, right? From a high level, why 4Me for MSPs?
Yeah, and I think you've touched on a lot of really great points there. A lot of these things relate to our differentiators. I mean, they are exactly what makes us so unique and so special for MSPs to use. And a lot of it, as you've mentioned already, comes down to that sort of architecture piece. And the architecture plays a huge part in how 4Me serves its customers, essentially. And if it was not for that architecture, we wouldn't be able to differentiate ourselves from any other solution in the market. And so from an MSP perspective, one of the main challenges that you have essentially is being able to collaborate without friction to your customers, and also be able to essentially manage the services that you provide to them in a way where you're able to literally track everything from the beginning to the end, whether that is even if you are providing services through a subcontractor or through another managed service provider or a supplier, and being able to really track those SLAs that you have between each party that's involved. And of course, I think we can go into more detail around that, but the architecture plays a huge part in this, because not only does it provide a truly secure connection between the two parties involved, but it's definitely that sort of ability to not just track and do your metrics and be able to do your billing well, but be able to provide a great service. And ultimately, that's what managed service providers are there to do. They are providing services, and equally, you want to be able to retain and also, win new business. So as a result, why would you not want to focus on being able to provide a great service, especially if one of the big buzzwords for the past 5-10 years in service management has been about customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I always find the conversations around MSPs and service management tooling fascinating, because in essence, that service management platform that sits at the core of an MSP is in fact their business. They are really tracking everything that they do within that platform. So it's critical, right? It's a critical decision. And actually, it should be very interesting, right, to hear about some of these differentiators. So let's start at that architectural piece, okay? And give us perhaps an insight, and I'm aware that this is a sort of audio mainly, so it's difficult for you to throw up a slide. It's going to test your ability to explain these things.
Descriptive skills here, Tuan.
But give us an idea of how that architecture supports this kind of service.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of keep it really easy to digest. So imagine you have like, a single cloud essentially. So for me is the owner essentially of that cloud, which is hosted on AWS, Amazon Web Services. And within that cloud, you essentially have different buckets. Each of those different buckets are your for me instances, your environments, which are provided to each of our customers. They're all highly secure, they're all highly self-contained, and they all utilize the best performance that AWS can offer. I mean, we measure our performance in milliseconds, not even in seconds, which, is not something that a lot of other providers or vendors can actually measure. And that robustness in terms of performance has a huge part to play in how MSPs can provide their services to their customers as well. And we want to make sure that all of our customers who are using the For Me platform have the best performance with the highest standard of security possible as well. And I think when you have those elements, you also therefore retain a sort of sense of reliability on the platform that it is that you're using. And so because everybody's sort of part of this cloud, everybody's in their own secure containers, it also means that we're able to deploy some of those weekly upgrades that we have non-intrusively and automatically as well. So everybody's essentially on the same version of For Me. That makes things really, really easy. So if one of your, and I'm putting on my MSP hat on now, if one of my customers also happens to use the For Me platform as well, we can utilize what is essentially called the trust, which is a secure relationship, a connection between the two buckets, between the two For Me customer environments. And that connection basically allows us to collaborate together seamlessly, without friction. And we're also able to do bi-directional tracking as well. So if I was to send a ticket to you, Sunil, to ask, to request for your services or to help me with my server because I'm having issues with the server, it's gone down, for example, and you're my managed service provider for it, you're able to easily work on that same request without it essentially creating a ticket in your own platform. You're essentially working on your customer's platform. And that is a really interesting play because that means one, there's less duplication of work. Two, there's also, less things to think about. Everything is contained in that one place. So you tackle things like transparency, visibility. You do have sort of, I guess, internal notes, so comments that you can kind of hold between you and your team without the customer seeing or without your provider seeing. But the main thing here is having that relationship take place just in the form of one ticket rather than having to, send things out via email and so forth. This is just obviously if everyone in an ideal world is using the For Me platform. And as a result of that, the out of the box reporting that you get from that, being able to see, the SLAs and the provision of delivery, the quality, and the performance of the services that are being provided by your MSP or your suppliers, and also vice versa, being able to see the level of service that you deliver to your customers is unmatched. And I think also playing on the part of the architecture too is that we also have the ability to essentially create a middleman, like an account that sort of sits in between. So even if your customer, if I've got my MSP hat on, even if your customer doesn't utilize the For Me platform, let's say they use any other service management platform or they don't use one at all, through that sort of middleman, it acts as like an integration layer which can be used to connect to another service management platform or to integrate with email for your customer, for example. And essentially, you're able to create that relationship between the two. And again, have that SLA tracking, have that cost and time tracking as well in play. And equally, the For Me platform gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to house your customers within the For Me platform itself under your own sort of umbrella, if that makes sense.
So there's quite a lot in that.
Yeah.
Maybe for anybody that is interested in this, right, this is a whole conversation in itself, right? And it's very warranted because there's lots, as I said there. So, but if I just maybe summarize, so you've got a foundation layer here of performance, on AWS, right? You offer weekly releases. There is no upgrade cycle as such within For.me, and that way you manage to maintain everybody on essentially the same version, right? Which makes the whole maintenance of the SaaS platform much more simple. So that's your kind of foundation layer.
Correct.
And then
Yeah.
on top of that, in essence, what you're saying is that, through these various buckets, you have a kind of a native or seamless integration, but not really an integration in the sense of, mapping data fields from one tool set to another. It's actually much more seamless than that, and it allows you to pass over information between these buckets in a much more secure, simple, easy fashion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a large part of that plays to the sort of standardization that exists within the design of the platform as well. Because, if you're working between two For.me platforms, like from one customer to another, essentially the root of it all is all the same. And as a result, it makes that seamless collaboration far faster and far easier to work with, because you don't have to do some of that individual mapping necessarily, unless of course you've added some additional custom fields, etc., etc. However, from an MSP to a customer, you don't have to worry about the custom fields, etc., that your customer has. You essentially are working on that ticket with them, and you'll be able to see the information that they make available to you in a highly secure way.
Yeah.
So you used the word I was going to use there as well. You're making collaboration super easy, right? And everything that sits around that. So that's really great, really great.
And I think, like, as an outcome of the sort of design work and the infrastructure and the architecture that we put behind the platform, is that you actually see far less time, resources being spent on trying to come up with a way on how to integrate these two, an MSP and a customer environment together. We actually do that really simply, and it's literally just a click of a button. It's like me sending you an invite, Daniel, on LinkedIn. It's honestly that easy.
Yeah. If you can find him, I only joke. He's everywhere on LinkedIn. No. I mean, so that's a kind of foundational thing, is it? That's part of that. The architecture, as you said, but you also have within For.me this concept of a service hierarchy, don't you? And actually, a service hierarchy is something that plays very well with MSPs, because we've all heard of gold, silver, bronze, right? MSPs in theory should have a sort of set of standardized offerings that they are able to offer to their customers, and 90% of customers fit into that set of standard offerings. So just maybe try and explain a little bit about that service hierarchy and how that aligns to the MSP business.
Yeah, that service hierarchy is really key, because literally the platform is essentially is entirely service centric. I think it's really built on a framework that really promotes service centricity in mind. And I think every piece of functionality that you have within For.me revolves around the services that are being consumed by your customers and provided and delivered by your teams or by your suppliers as a result. So essentially, like, right from the very beginning of your For.me journey, or even from your organizational maturity, if we're thinking about it from that perspective, is that from the moment that you start, everything begins with the services. And so you're essentially going to be set up for success in the future, because you're driving that customer experience and that employee experience around the services that you are delivering and that you are allowing your customers to consume. So you don't even have to define and build like any sort of complex processes around this. A lot of the design work has already been done for you. If anything, we just enable you to provide great services. That's sort of like the cherry on top, right?
Yeah. And I mean, actually at Accession, we're going through that sort of design process with a large and quite complex MSP at the moment. And one of the sort of byproducts that this process is having is that it sort of makes an organization think about how they can improve really their business services or the services they offer to their customers, and standardize, improve the way in which their support teams operate, and also have a much better handle on costs associated with those services and the relative profitability, right, around the various services they offer. So I guess that brings us on to, you know, that sort of visibility of costs across the service hierarchy. So, you know, how does that work in practice? You know, what do people need to do, right, to actually start to go, hey, I can now see how much this is costing me to deliver and how much it is, you know, an opportunity.
How much we're charging them.
Or how much we're charging them, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at play, and I think the two main things, especially when you're working on the For.Me platform around this topic, is being able to capture the time that you're spending working on delivering that service, which in turn, you know, may have variation of cost depending on who it is that is working on that. So, you know, if we have if there's a difference between Daniel and Sunil's salaries, then of course, you know, what you're being paid per hour, or essentially what you are charging to your customer per hour, may be different, but depending on your expertise and your specialism. And so being able to sort of capture the time against each person who has a different chargeable cost, that is something that is already built into the platform. And so as a result of that, you're able to see, okay, this person has spent this much time for this customer delivering these sets of services. And you can do the same for each person that is doing that as well. So you've got multiple different views that are available there. One is at the customer level. You know, how much are you charging your customer based on the time spent delivering those services that they've subscribed to? The second one would be, you know, looking at the time that is being spent on each of those services. So let's say you'll have a much better idea of, you know, your service delivery. A lot of your experts and staff members are charging their time against infrastructure as a service in comparison to maybe managed network as an example, right? If we're purely thinking just like IT managed services. And so being able to see that difference, eventually over time, you can start to see and engage with, you know, your peers to say, well, actually, we understand that, you know, our networking side of the business is, you know, we're not really spending that much time on it. People have subscribed to it as part of their contracts, but we're not seeing much traction, much engagement, much adoption of that service. Why is that? Are there any sort of changes that we need to make? Do we need to push out that messaging to our customers to let them know that we provide this service? Or is it because customers are just not happy with the way that that service is being delivered and therefore don't want to engage with it? And being able to see that differentiation at the service level is not something that I've personally have come across in any other solution that I've worked with or been exposed to in the past. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys.
No, I think that For.Me is certainly fairly unique, right, in that approach, yeah, how that works. So I think you touched on something really quickly, just to be clear for everyone listening. Time recording, right? So time recording is just built into the platform, yeah?
Yeah.
No more timesheets to fill in, huh? It's all done for you. That'll be music to lots of people's ears, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of standardized sort of options that allow you to register time automatically, depending on like where you are at within the ticket itself, which makes time capture a lot more easier than it has ever been in the past. Because a lot of people would rely on, manually inputting time. And so this kind of provides a little bit of a more automated way to capture that time.
Making good use of the time.
So one of the things, Tuan, that we perhaps maybe, when we talked about MSPs generally, actually probably focused a little bit on IT, but actually I think maybe we're missing a key element here, which is that for me is not just a solution for the provision of IT services, is it? It is because of its service centricity, applicable across a whole variety, whatever you really want, right, of business services. So just explain the sort of the thinking behind how you've set up to achieve that kind of that kind of ESM approach.
Yeah, and so no, you really hit the nail on the head there. It's great that you know this, because yeah, 100%. It's that service centricity means so much more than just thinking about it in terms of IT. Yeah, I think a lot of organizations and previous companies that I've worked with on service management in the past, don't always think of enterprise service management as something that they should be thinking about straight away. But actually, from a long-term strategic perspective, if you're really looking at aligning your business objectives across the organization, essentially that is a form of enterprise management, right? And the enterprise or the business as a whole itself is providing services, whether that is externally or internally to each other. And that enterprise service management really plays a huge part in that service management piece in general. And I think you made a really good point at the Connect event that we were at as well, which is actually so it should just be service management, because it really benefits everybody, not just IT, and we got to really look beyond that. And so the platform itself, is, because it's built on that service-centric framework, it has that enterprise-ready service enablement. I know I'm using like some fancy words here, and hopefully it's easy to digest, but what I mean by that is the structure and the way it's architected, the way it's designed, the framework that's already built in there enables businesses, enables any organization to be enterprise ready. So that's really looking at long-term scalability, or really looking at that service management provision across the organization, both internally and externally. So not only do you have your customer facing services that are provided to those end users or to your external customers, but you also have all of the underpinning services that are provided across the board. Like, let's take a typical example. How would you do your employee onboarding at the moment?
That's a question to us, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Right, okay. Sunil, well, you're probably the best person to field that one.
I was about to slippery shoulder that to you, Dan, because you joined much more recently than me. So.
Well, all I can say is, so I've been with Accession just over a year now, just shy of a year and a half, I guess. And from my point of view, the onboarding process as a receiver of that service was seamless. I can't speak to the technologies and processes behind the scenes that enabled that, but yeah, couldn't fault it. But
I can tell you what the technology was, Dan. It was like the proverbial swan, right, on a lake. That you just got the seamless thing at the top, and underneath there's a whole bunch of people scrabbling around trying to make it happen.
Sure.
I don't think we're a great example, Tuan. I have to be open with you there. Maybe tell us about a classic example of a customer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the thing is that, it's like the Titanic hitting the iceberg. You don't really see what's underneath. You just see like what's at the top. So you try to maneuver it and like that swan on the lake. But everything else underneath that, all of those things are, they're all working collaboratively together to provide a seamless, tranquil lake that the swan, is like, trying to swim across, and if it wasn't for that seamless collaboration that you have underneath, all of those, what we call, underpinning services as part of that enterprise service catalog, you would not be able to have such a great, onboarding experience, as a great example of that. Equally, when we think about, and just tying this back into the MSP conversation as well, is in a similar fashion that customer onboarding element as well. Essentially, MSPs can be using the platform to manage their customer onboarding experience, from everything, around sort of legal compliance and having those contracts and agreements in place, to then, setting them up and managing, their services or creating their services, and, really kind of showing that actually they can have a seamless experience all through the use of the For Me platform.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen that before.
Yeah, I think there's a key point here around MSPs, which is that your service provision that you're delivering to your customers can be around IT, it can be around managed print, it can be around the management of parking fines, it can be outsourcing your finance department, it can be for a local council managing applications for a blue badge. Whatever it is, right, within the For Me platform, you're able to take that service centricity, define those services, and you have a platform, a tool set there for the management of the delivery of those services. So for any MSPs that might be listening to this thinking, well, we're not an IT, service provider, actually that isn't the point. The point here is that you have the services, or set of services, you have a set of processes around supporting those services, you have a business model that charges the customer for the provision of those services and costs you something for the delivery of those services. For Me enables you as a platform to manage that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, just to put it perhaps a little bit more succinctly, I think it's fair to say that For Me is a service management platform, and regardless of the fact if it's IT, to your point, Sunil,
Yeah.
somebody would like to have something and there needs to be a fulfillment aspect around that, regardless of what it is. I need a new laptop or I need a blue badge. Then, fundamentally, For Me can accommodate all of those things and more, right?
Yeah. So, Tuan, you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Tell us a bit about reporting.
Yeah, everything needs to be reported on, because otherwise, how are you going to know how something is doing? Yeah, how do you know? If you don't have the data to justify your decisions, if you don't have the data to, basically go out there and be able to benchmark yourself against others, that information is so key. And I think with For Me, we have over 400 reports out of the box, already deployed, maintained by us for you. Pretty much, our developers have come from service management backgrounds, so they already know kind of, what our service delivery managers and service management leads are thinking of when it comes to reporting. So even though that I say there's 400 reports out of the box, that doesn't mean you cannot go into the weeds with them as well, because you can create thousands of combinations of reports through granular filtering and things like that. So even if, let's take an example of all open tickets, for example, right? I can apply a number of different filters that will just entirely change what that looks like. So if I do all open tickets and then filter it by a certain customer of mine that I provide services to, then I'll be able to see an individual report for that customer for those open tickets, and I can manage it that way. Or I can then group it by the status of that ticket as well. Is it currently in flight? Is it waiting for their response? Has it been resolved? So, there's plenty of different combinations. And I think where MSPs as well really benefit, or actually not, even if you're not an MSP, even if you are just an organization itself, everyone benefits from having, and I mentioned this earlier, that bi-directional view of that service delivery between you and your suppliers, essentially your service providers, right? And so we have essentially what is called provider reports and customer reports. So for you as a provider of services to a customer, you can see a list of your customers that you provide services to, and you'll see a breakdown of your KPIs on a month-by-month basis and what services you're delivering, have there been any outages, etc. And also you're able to look at it the other way. If you are consuming services from a supplier who, you outsource your service desk to, or you outsource your networking to, or if, let's say, you work with a technology provider to supply laptops or equipment, things like that, is you're able to see also the services that they essentially deliver to you, because they underpin what you deliver to your customer. And I think
that
being
be
able to
internal and external, right, underpinning service.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, and the thing is, actually, it makes it a lot easier to be able to digest it that way, because when you think about, let's say you're not happy with your current provider, your current internet provider, and you want to switch that, you are still providing an internet-facing service to your employees, to your customers, so that they can access the web. But if you're not happy with, a specific internet provider because, they're slow, they never respond, and, it just never works, then you have that ability to make that switch without really affecting the customer facing side. And you don't affect the SLAs that you have towards your customers just by switching the underpinning service. And I think that's something that we offer.
Yeah, which is really fundamental to the efficient management of a managed service provider business, right? You're always looking for opportunities to improve in that regard. So I think, we've covered quite a lot. I think if we just sort of were to draw this back a little bit to the benefits, right? So, what I think we've talked about here is, provision of services to customers in a way that makes it easier for them to consume, with a subsequent impact on their experience. We've talked about an ability to improve productivity and efficiency within the organization, partly down to the architecture of For.Me and the platform, but also through that visibility of things like reporting and that visibility of costs underpinning services, etc. So you've got a whole productivity efficiency piece there. And then you've got this ability, I think, to scale, right, haven't you? So it's not just IT, it's whatever service provision you currently make available to your customers, or want to make available to future customers, or maybe I don't know, a silly example, or not a silly example. An example is you might buy in, right? Acquire another company, right, and add that service provision. You could easily onboard both those customers and those services onto the For.Me platform. So you have this sort of view of genuine service centricity across whatever range of services you have. So it's quite compelling, I would say.
Yeah,
Highly compelling. Yeah.
Well, you would definitely agree with that, Tuan, because you work for For.Me. But I think, as partners, actually, as partners of right, and as you know, right, we work with a number of different vendors, but actually, there is a real differentiation here, okay? And I think when customers understand that service centricity, it always, strikes a note with them, right? They always can see the opportunity there. So it's it's a strong message, definitely.
Yeah, and I think because the platform has been designed and built in such a way that makes it easy to achieve those things, and you're also given that sort of you're given the complete functionality as well. So you have everything at your fingertips that enable you to be able to deliver those services well, and to deliver those services in such a way that benefit not only your customers, but also benefit you and your organization, your business, as well. And I kind of want to tie this into a little bit of like advanced functionality as well. Like there's a lot of techniques and a lot of thought that has been put behind the way that the platform has been built and designed and how it's going to work now and in the future to enable any For.me platform user to really get the most out of service management in such a way that it achieves those goals that and the strategic vision that you have for your business and for your organization.
Very good. That seems like a good place to wrap up.
I think that's great. Yeah, Tuan, brilliant insights there. And just to those of you listening, watching this, perhaps, should you like to find out more about the For.me platform, or indeed any of the points that Tuan or we've spoken about today, please just reach out. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tuan.
Thank you for your time.